Okay, so the sound works, so I've started it,
All
and I'm gonna shut this door and you gentlemen go as long as you need.
Alright, so, I guess we can start out with your name.
Okay, my name is Denis Gladbach. He asked me to spell it, so Gladbach. Probably ought to look in the camera as opposed to looking at
I think
you.
it's fine.
Yeah.
So we go through your address and I think we just probably turn this in.
Okay,
So it says here you were in the Army.
correct,
As your branch.
correct.
What can you tell me about that?
Well, I signed up to go in the Army in April of 1983, probably April 5th, so it was about 7 weeks before I graduated high school. I was 17 at the time, had to get my parents to sign off on giving me permission to go in. I left for basic training in September of 1983. I did 2 months of basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. Fort Dix is no longer an active Army post, it's a National Guard post now. So that's gone from the Army days. And then I spent 4 months of training in my career field at Aberdeen, Maryland, at the United States Army Ordnance Center and School. I trained in what their title was tracked vehicle repairman, but it was primarily tank mechanic. At that point in time, the common platforms that we trained on were the M60A3 main battle tank and the M113 armored personnel carrier. We spent a lot of time on those two. The M1 Abrams was a brand new piece of equipment that was being introduced at Fort Hood, but wasn't far enough along to be training everybody on, and there were only selected places that had it. I graduated from the Army's Ordnance Center and School in February of 1984 and was stationed in Germany. Originally sent to Nuremberg, where the 614th Maintenance Company was set up, and the 614th Maintenance Company was branched out. They had their main headquarters in Nuremberg with the 2nd Armored Cavalry, but the 2nd Armored Cavalry had 3 separate detachments. The first was in Amberg, the second was in Bamberg, and the third was in Binlock. And if I've got that right, I could be wrong about that, but really was the maintenance detachment that I was sent to was the 2nd of the 614th Maintenance, which was in Bamberg, Germany. And they had a section of the border between East and West Germany at Camp Hof, H-O-F. And we maintained the equipment for the 2nd.
Michelle? Oliver?
She's not in here. Sorry.
There we go, nice interruption. Cool. So the 2nd and the 614th Maintenance Company supported the 2nd of the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment and on the border between East and West Germany. So we had a real mission. The communist horde was over the wall, and we had to make sure that if they did anything, we were ready to go. And the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, regardless of what other training activities were going on, they always had a troop on the border that patrolled their section of border. So it was a live mission all the time, and our maintenance support mission was if something's broke, fix it and get it back up to them. One of the things that we love to brag about, and I didn't really understand what it was about till I've continued my military career in the National Guard since then, but we maintained a 98% or better readiness rating. And at that point in time, the minimum standard was a 92%. So we were near the top, if not at the top, of all the readiness rating standards. So there were lots of people that were nosing around looking at us. What are you guys doing different? And we were just it was a live mission. If something was broke, we fixed it. And that was, we worked hard and we played hard, but we worked hard. We spent a lot of time working. After hours was no big deal for us then, but you're talking about a bunch of kids that were 18, 19, 20, whatever needed to be done, we did it, so.
What was it like just being in the area during the Cold War?
It was a little, it was definitely challenging. We had a lot of Germans in that area, native Germans, had both experiences with the U.S. military. You still had a lot of the older generation that had lived through the Second World War as kids, and they were not sure. They were very appreciative of having the Americans there because they understood what the Germans had been like and the fear of how far the Russians were going to come, where the line was going to be drawn, who was going to get there first. And on the other side of that, you had the generation of their children which had lived through the Vietnam War and watched us, the Americans, struggle with how we were dealing with our own internal conflict, and didn't have much respect for us, but still appreciated the fact that they weren't communist. And then you had the generation that was my age that that was like, nasty Americans, what are you doing over here? Why are you in our country? Go home, we don't need you here. And so it was challenging. You didn't know what type of atmosphere you were going to run into at any given time. For the most part, they were very friendly and very happy to see us. In the larger metropolitan areas, you ran into the more complex feelings, emotions of how we were, what we were. When you get out in the countryside where they didn't see a lot of Americans, they were always super appreciative that we were there. Whether they just were happy that we were Americans and were there, or whether they were complex enough to understand the amount of financial support that the U.S. government was providing to Germany, I don't know. It's hard to say, but it was really interesting. One of the things that I did with my initial entry contract was you had different bonuses and different things that you signed up for, but I told them, I said, I want to sign up because I want to go to Germany. I had always been a student of history. Coach Jeffries used to teach history here, and I had him for Western Civilization 1, Western Civilization 2, and then my senior year I took him for 20th Century Wars and American West. So, I mean, I had him for 3 years of high school here at Elias. He was a fantastic storyteller. He's a great teacher, but he was a fantastic storyteller. And he really sparked my interest in, what was it behind the German people that made them believe in the causes that sent them to war in both World War I and World War II. And it just being over there and seeing the civilization, understanding what they went through with the plagues and the revolution of the Catholic Church, and seeing all the history that was there. The United States likes to think we've got a great history in the European culture. We're just a small segment of everything that they've got going over there. So it was that I signed up to go to Germany. I enjoyed Germany. I saw a lot of Germany. I enjoyed the German scenery and the German customs and the German heritage. So I spent 2 years in Germany.
That was my next question. How
Yep,
long you
2 years in Germany, so February of '84 to February of '86. February of '86, I came back to the United States, had a little bit of terminal leave, and then was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. So I was at Fort Lewis, Washington during it was kind of an interesting time. While I was in Germany, the M1 Abrams main battle tank came out, was distributed to all the armor units in Europe. And so all of the M60A3s were pulled back. TACOM, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, I think it's Tactical Command, took all the M60A3 tanks back to Warren, Michigan, modernized them a little bit, rebuilt what was good, salvaged the parts. I think they even put some together and sold them to some of our common supporters like Israel or other countries like that that we supported. But the M1 battle tank was the main tank out there. And of course, while I was over there, they transitioned to the M1A1, which the only difference between the M1 and the M1A1, the original M1 came out with a 105 millimeter rifled bore gun on it, and the M1A1 had a 105 millimeter smooth bore. The smooth bore 105 millimeter was a common NATO round. So all we did was say, hey, you know what the Germans and the Brits, the French are all doing, that's a good thing. We're going to do the same thing. And so we made a common platform to where we could be used by all, and we set that up and we did that. I got to Fort Lewis, Washington, and was assigned to support the 2nd and the 77th Armor Battalion, and I learned a lot about the dynamics of the finances behind keeping a modern force. The new equipment was going where it was needed, which was in Europe at that point in time. The unit that I was assigned to had the M60A1 tanks, and the summer of '85 they turned in their M60A1s and got M60A3s. So the tanks that we'd gotten rid of in Germany had been recommissioned and were being used by stateside soldiers. And I was like, wow. I mean, the M60A3s were Vietnam era equipment, and here we are, we're issuing them to soldiers in 1986. I'm like, wow, this is weird. But you know, we did what we were supposed to do. One of the things that you learned about being in the military is you can question some things, but you really can't challenge anything. You're told to do something, you do it. I stayed, I never advanced any further than Specialist 4 rank-wise. So the majority of my time was recovery operations. When I was stationed in Germany, they got me on a wheeled vehicle wrecker, and I learned how to run the M88A1, which is a tracked vehicle recovery, and learned and really enjoyed recovery because you were going all the time. There was always a level of uniqueness to whatever your job was. I've got the pictures I could pull out there to show you.
What sort of jobs were they?
Anytime something got stuck, you had to go figure out how to get it. So anytime something broke down, you had to recover it and bring it back in to get it fixed. And I was never in a firefight situation, but if you were ever in a battle situation, it was just a matter of hooking it up and getting it out of there. Recover as much of it as you could so that it could be repaired and put back into the fight. There was the neat thing about being assigned to the wrecker was in the field environment, whenever there was a job to do, the only lift was the wrecker. You know, I mean, in a shop environment, you've got either chain falls or you've got hydraulic lifts or cranes. There's other pieces of equipment where you can get the job done. When you're out in the mud, the only thing you've got is a wrecker. So if something broke down, we'll get back to wreck. So I was engaged all the time. There was never any downtime, and I enjoyed that. You know, I always had my hands. It felt as a certain level of importance associated with it. Hey, you can't do your job without me. Let's go. Let's get this done. So, and there was the camaraderie of arms where, you know, people recognized that you thought you were important, so they made sure that you didn't get too full of yourself. You understand what that's like being a member of the football team.
Yeah.
So, yep. So that's always a good thing. And then I did recovery when I was on stateside also. So, and got some neat assignments. So one of the things that was really cool was they brought a captured Soviet personnel carrier and a Soviet tank to Fort Lewis, Washington for museum purposes. And so they brought them there, and they were on a truck. Well, we've got to get them unloaded off the truck. Well, the Armor Battalion can move these type of stuff. Go get their recovery guys up, so we got to unload them and got to see. Now they were old Soviet era stuff, but it was still cool to see the real stuff. So that was kind of neat.
When you were saying recovery, what were you more busy in Germany or in the United States?
Oh, in Germany. In Germany. One of the things I learned about stateside duty was they punched a clock. You know, every first formation was at 8 o'clock in the morning. Final formation was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it didn't matter what jobs needed to be done. Yeah, that can be done tomorrow. That's more work for tomorrow. Every Friday afternoon, everybody in the grades of E4 and below had a broom, and we're sweeping the Sergeant Major's track park. And that's what it was referred to as. Here's all the tanks that are parked out there. We're sweeping behind all of them, and then the NCOs, E5s and E6s, were making sure that everybody was sweeping. So, and it was comical to me, and I didn't really understand it then, but and I'm not sure I understand it now. But it was busy work, you know. You had to put on a good appearance for the American people. I learned later on, much later on, after I'd been out of active duty for some time, that there were a lot of dynamics associated with the perception of the American public, who is the taxpayers that are paying for the wages of the military, and the military, about what their worth was. So there was always the folks that were career military that had been there for a long time, that had been through the Vietnam War, or the end of the Vietnam War. And understand, I'm talking 1986. The Vietnam War is just 12 years after being called done, but you got career soldiers that are my leaders that are, yeah, every bit of 14, 16, 18 years into their careers, that are, so they were exposed to the Vietnam War. And the public, really, the American public in the late 60s, 70s, they weren't fans of the military. Now, they were taking an aggressive approach to the political decisions that the military was forced to take. But at that point in time, they didn't necessarily disconnect the two. You know, the military was the ones that were doing the things that they thought was wrong. You know, stop it. Yeah, it wasn't quite that simple. I'm sure Mr. Elmel's gone over with you how Vietnam and the tough decisions and some of the things that were done over there. So, yeah.
All right, so after Fort Washington, or Fort Lewis, Washington, yeah. What'd you do then?
I decided I'd had enough of the military. I was a little dissatisfied with the way that my military career had gone in Fort Lewis and the way the military was structured and what they were doing. So I said, I'm going to get out. And I came back home. I had a good friend of my father's convinced me to join the Missouri Army National Guard. And, you know, I did different odd jobs. I tried being a mechanic for a little while. It wasn't the same as being in the military, and it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I spent a year doing construction. I worked for Charles Lubert, laying and sanding hardwood floors. It's a great job, and they're a great family, and it's a great company. You know, I'm 6'5", working on my feet, on my feet all day long. I was beginning to realize that if I don't straighten out my back, I'm not going to be tall for very long. So I went to college at Lincoln, started going to school, wasn't sure what I was going to do. Had an uncle that convinced me that I needed to consider engineering. Lincoln had a transfer program with Rolla. I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering in '94. I used my military education benefits to pay for it, and the Missouri National Guard to pay for it. And currently working as a maintenance engineer over at ABB. So it's been, and I've been a member of the Missouri National Guard or different states' National Guard. I've kind of bounced around. When I graduated college, first job was in Minnesota, so I transferred from the Missouri Guard to the Minnesota Guard. And, they transferred me to Iowa, so I transferred from the Minnesota Guard to the Iowa Guard. Had an opportunity to come back to Jefferson City and transferred from the Iowa Guard to the Missouri Guard. I've been extremely fortunate in my career. I have not had not been called on in the last 16 years that we've been fighting the war on terror to serve overseas in either Afghanistan or Iraq, but have supported many soldiers that have, so.
What was your favorite part about your time in the Army?
The camaraderie, there's something about working with a group of people that you don't get to pick these people. I mean, you're thrown into a working environment and you're told to do something and you train really hard to do it, and there's a camaraderie, a brotherhood, if you will, that's built through the training, the intense living conditions that it doesn't matter what would happen. I've still got friends today that I went through basic training with, I stay in touch with. Not as many that I went through the ordnance school with. We've kind of all gone our own directions, but there's a group of about 5 or 6 of us that are on Facebook together, stationed in Germany, that I still stay in touch with. And if they needed something right now, I'd figure out a way to drop things and go.
They're stationed in Germany?
They were stationed. They were stationed in Germany with me.
They still are, and I was like,
no, they're back. They're back. One's down in Florida, one's in North Carolina, and one's in Michigan. And we, you know, if they called on me now, yeah, all right, we got to go. It's kind of like family. Not everybody. It was really interesting coming from Central Missouri, growing up in Central Missouri, growing up in a large family. I'm the oldest of 5. My dad is a middle child of 9. Mom's a middle child of 8. I have a large family. I'm used to large family events. When our families get together, it doesn't matter which side of the family, there's a lot of people and there's a lot of dynamics, and it's no big deal. So going to basic training, okay, there's a whole bunch of people, there's a lot of dynamics, it's no big deal. Central Missouri is, I don't want to say shaded, that's not the right way to say it, but we're protected. I ran into a lot of environments that I never really had the opportunity to be exposed to. There's not a large African American population in Central Missouri. There's not a large Hispanic. Let me rephrase that. There wasn't a large African American population or a large Hispanic population that I grew up with in high school from '79 to '83. You didn't have that choice in the military. These are the group. Here's the 60 people you're going to live the next 2 months of your life with, and it doesn't matter what community they're from, what background they're from, what ethnicity, you know, what their race, their color, their creed. It doesn't matter. You're going to work together, and you're going to live together, and you're going to become really good friends. And it's just the way it was. You just accept that. It's probably easier for a young person, 18, 19, 20, to accept those sorts of things than it is somebody that's a little older. You kind of get set in your ways as you get a little age on you. But if you don't have the opportunity to go out and see what the rest of the world's like, you don't recognize the beauty of what you've got back here. I've always been extremely proud of the fact that I'm from Central Missouri, and regardless of where I go, my friends knew that I was from Central Missouri. I was thumbing through pictures prepping for this and found that I had an old Helias Crusaders ball cap that I wore with me when I was in Germany, so they all knew that I was a proud Helias Crusader. And that was cool. That was really cool. I'd forgotten that I was in. You know, Mom sent me, 1984 was Helias's first state football championship. So here I am in Germany, and she's sending me all the cutouts from the News Tribune, so I've got all those. 82 was the first year that Helias wrestling took state, but we had like a 4-year run there, 82, 83, 84, and 85, maybe even 86, we won the state wrestling championship. So Mom's clipping all those articles and sending them to me. Homecoming parades with the band, because I marched in the Elias Band for 4 years. Anytime she got pictures of that, she'd clip them and she'd send them to me. So it was really cool. I saved all that stuff and I was extremely proud of that. It's just, if you don't leave here, you don't recognize how good you've got it. You don't recognize how great it is. And we've told our children, all 4 of our kids are graduated from Elias Catholic, and told every one of them, go see the world, go out and learn. I can tell you all day long how great it is. Until you get the opportunity to see it, you won't know. You won't know what you've got. Kate was involved intensely with the mission trips when she was in high school here, and really had an affinity for St. Jude's in Memphis. Did that, I think she did it all 4 years. If not, I know she did it 3. Stephanie really engrossed herself with French, took French for 4 years and did the tour of Europe with the French class. Mrs. Zeitz took them on years ago. Anthony hasn't been quite as internationally engaged, but he, 2 tours of Philmont. He did it both times, and he's trying to figure out a way to go on a 3rd. And dude, it takes money. We're paying for school. You got to figure out where your priorities lie. But Nick really got into the whole Philmont thing because he did it twice. So he's been there twice, and he's going to do Europe this summer with the Voyagers International. All the kids that got 1s in state vocal or instrumental music were invited. So he's actually, it's the state of Missouri thing. It's not a Elias Catholic thing, but he's got 3 of his friends, seniors, that are going. Noah Newberry, Madeline Beach, and Madeline.
Maddie Arnold?
Yes, Maddie Arnold. Thank you. Sorry, I drew a blank there for a second. Yep. Yeah. So the 4 of them, they refer to themselves as BANG. Beach, Arnold, Newberry, and Gladbach. So they're going to hang around together, so that'll be cool. But we have an amazing opportunity here in Central Missouri. We've got a tight-knit group, and we support each other. The community comes out for all kinds of things, and you don't always see that in the rest of the world. But if you get a chance to get out and see the rest of the world, you'll recognize how fantastic it really is here. And I don't think you can just read about it. I think you need to go live it. I think you need to go live someplace else for a little while to realize how fantastic we really do have it here in Central Missouri.
So that's probably one of the biggest things you learned from your experience in the military?
I think so, yes. How I really had it. I had a good thing here. That's how I ended up back here. So,
Okay.
But that, and it's a better appreciation for what the rest of the world is like. When we start talking about political systems in the world, the United States political system, our version of democracy, has its own flaws. There's no argument about that. There's all kinds of things that could go different, right or wrong. But when you start looking at what the rest of the world has got, the dictators that are still in certain parts of the world, the freedoms that other parts of the world have and don't have, we've got a good thing over here. And so you'll fight to support what we've got.
Okay. Actually, a question I had earlier that I couldn't bring up.
Sure,
at the time.
fire away.
Has your family, has your family ever been part of the military or military family per se? Or?
Not really. Now, my father wasn't able to be in the military. He lost an eye when he was 10 years old, so he's only got one eye. He wasn't eligible to be drafted. But he served as he learned a trade after high school as a teletype repairman. And in the 60s, he graduated high school in 62, if I remember correctly. Graduated with his technical degree in 63, and Mom and Dad were married in 64. He got a job with Western Union, and in the mid-60s, Western Union had the national communications contract. So all of the defense communication contracts went via teletype. So Dad was responsible for repairing that equipment, and he had an assignment at Fort Carson, Colorado. Well, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Cold War era facilities in the United States, but there at Fort Carson, Colorado, there's a facility, the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, where the U.S. military bored into the side of a mountain and they made a nuclear-proof bunker. Dad fixed the communication equipment in that bunker in the 60s, so all of the stuff that was coming through, the teletypes about what's going on in China, Saigon, North Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, he was seeing that stuff every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there wasn't necessarily
There wasn't a connection. No, there wasn't a connection.
He was around it.
He was around it all the time. And in that time, you had family members that were drafted. Dad's, like I said, he's 1 of 9. He had 7 brothers. His first 2 brothers were drafted and served in the Army. Brother number 3 joined the Army Reserve. So Uncle Tom was in the Army, Uncle Leonard was in the Army, Uncle Bill was in the Army Reserve. Uncle Jim never served, wasn't drafted. Dad wasn't eligible. Uncle Bob was drafted and served in the Army in Germany during the Vietnam War. Now you tell me that's not lucky. So he had a good position there. And then by the time my Uncle Shorty was eligible to be drafted, the draft was done away with. Mom's side of the family, she's got 5 brothers. Uncle Bill served in the Navy. Uncle John was never drafted. Uncle Larry served in the Army. Uncle Paul was not medically eligible. And Uncle Steve served in the Army. Uncle Steve actually was in Vietnam for about 7 days, contracted some crazy jungle fever or something. They couldn't cure it over there. They sent him to Guam. After about 3 months in Guam, he was cured of it, and they sent him back to the States. And we're not going to try this again. So another luck. So there's a little bit of a military connection in my family, but it wasn't overarching. Hey, you know, we've served and you're going to serve and that sort of stuff. But yeah, there was definitely a connection, and there's a respect for our country and a respect for some of the more broad ideals of why we have our version of government.
I know you kind of like talked about multiple experiences, but if you could pick one highlight, I don't know, an event or experience, one highlight of your entire military career, what would you say?
Probably the thing that I remember, the one event, every year in Europe they have a reforger training exercise, and reforger is return of forces to Germany, okay? And I got over there in February of 1984, and in the fall of 1984 we did a reforger. The 2nd Armored Cavalry participated in a reforger, and it was in southern Germany, and it was in the field, and it was an intense training exercise. The armor battalions were constantly moving and maneuvering and training in Soviet era tactics, big tank formations and all this stuff, and they were tearing up equipment on a daily basis, and they would bring stuff to it. They'd run it, play with it all day, train all day, and they'd tear it up. And so they'd show up. It started about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. From about 2 o'clock in the afternoon till probably 8 or 9 o'clock would be, here's all these work orders coming in. Here's all our work orders coming in. So our maintenance control team will be, all right, we got to fix this, we got to get this, we got to get this. We got these parts, we can do this, we can do this. And we would work all night. And they would play all day, and we'd work all night. Sometimes you get to see them play. But for that particular exercise, it rained. It rained for 20 days straight.
Oh, no.
Everything was mud, but we continued to do our job. You could be mad about it all you wanted to. It didn't do you any good. After about day 2, a lot of our gear was wet, and they went out, our platoon sergeant went out, found a bunch of pallets, and went down to the local hardware store and bought a bunch of plywood. So we set up in our tent. We had a large tent we were all in. We didn't have cots or anything. We were all on the ground. They set up the pallets, and then they put plywood over the pallets. They raised us up out of the mud.
Just
So,
enough.
yeah, so, you know, we had a dry place to get into and we could stay dry. You know, it was a field environment, so you didn't, and it's unique to military. Talk to Mr. Wardway, and you can ask him, you tell him the story afterwards and see how much he relates to it. But you only got to shower like every 4th day.
Wow.
They had field showers, so you just, we were all in it together. It didn't matter. Everybody was on the showering every 4 days, so it wasn't like you were, you know, somebody else. It was just, it was what it was. And you just kept working. But it was that type of situation. Like I told you earlier, I had the wrecker, so any of the work that had to be done, I was there, I was working in it every night. I've got some pictures of where we're knee deep in mud trying to drain the water off some spots. Was driving the wrecker, coming back from something, was driving the wrecker up a mountain road, and the roadside was so soft that the wrecker just slipped over the edge of the road. Thank God there was a tree there, or else I'd have gone tumbling down the road. Had to get another wrecker in to pull me back up on the road, but you know, it was all soft and moist, and it just collapsed. The more we dug in, the farther down the hill we went. So it was a great training exercise. It was long hours, it was hard work, but I remember Reforger 1984. And maybe because it was my first real military training exercise, but that's probably one that I've held everything else up to, and some of them stand up to it, but not all of them do. That's the one that I remember the most. And you know, it was the longest one ago, so maybe I've put the rose-colored glasses on and look at it, but I don't remember it being one of those things where we were complaining all the time. It was, hey, we're here to do a job, and we did our job, and the conditions were tough, so we had to be tougher. That's just.
How long did it last?
It was a 30-day exercise, and like I said, the first 20 days it rained. We were happy to see the sun. So,
That's incredible.
yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about? Any other stories? Or?
Man, I've been thinking about it ever since I received confirmation from Mr. Emmel that we were going to do this, and I'm like, geez, it's been neat reflecting on a lot of this stuff. It really has. But no, I think you did a good job of covering everything. You let me wander where I wanted to. So if he's got any follow-up that he wants to do, if there's anything,
I don't know.
but outside of that, I think you're good.
Yeah, all these questions are all pretty much the same.
Okay.
That's incredible stories and incredible experiences you had there. Well, it's been great hearing these stories.
Good deal. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. It really has been fun.
It's been incredible.
All right.
Guess we need Mr. Emmel. I don't
Stop on the camera. Yeah, I'll let him.
I
call
let him do that, and then
Yeah, there you go.
be safe about it.
I think he saw me.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're good.
Good deal.
Did he do an okay job?
Yep, I haven't turned it off yet. So.
Both of you, has he done an